Hello friends and welcome to my channel Iballdesigningdeveloper. So like you all know that in previous video we have learned about stacks in C++ and I hope you enjoyed that video in which we have covered up many different things about stacks and I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. So in this video we will be learning about queues in C++, that what are queues, how to use it, and basically what's the purpose to use queues in C++. I'll be telling you all the things about it. So I hope you'll be enjoying this video of queues from start, in which we will be having a learn about queues. Like we will be having a great knowledge about queues in this video and I hope you'll be enjoying this video from start. So if you enjoy this video and if you learn things about queues in C++, remember to hit a like to this video, and if you're new on this channel, want to see more videos like that, so remember to subscribe, and after subscribing hit notification bell so I can get the notifications of all my coming up videos which I'll be uploading on this channel. So now what we are waiting for, let's move to computer screen and let's get started. So now here we are on the computer screen, and like I've told you in the start that today in this video I will be telling you about queues in C++. So now we'll be starting with it and we need to understand now what are queues in C++ and how we can use them. So if we talk about queues here, so basically a queue store multiple elements in a specific order called FIFO. FIFO stands for first in first out. To visualize FIFO, think of a queue as people standing in line in a supermarket. The first person to stand in line is also the first who can pay and leave the supermarket. This way of organizing elements is called FIFO in computer science and programming. Unlike vectors, elements in the queue are not accessed by index numbers. Since queue elements are added at the end and removed from the front, you can only access an element at the front or the back. To use a queue, you have to include the queue header file like #include queue. So normally if we talk about queue, so queue stores multiple elements in a specific order called FIFO, and like in the previous video I have told you about a stack. In a stack we were also storing the multiple elements in a specific order, but that was stored in LIFO, which was last in first out. But in queue we store multiple elements in a specific order again, but it is being stored in FIFO, which is called as first in first out. And to visualize it we need to understand a example, like an example in which people are standing in a line in a supermarket, and the first person to stand in the line is also the first who can pay and leave the supermarket, and that's the really logical example of it. And this way of organizing elements is called FIFO in computer science and programming. And normally in vectors, elements are queue, means elements in queues are not being accessed by index numbers, and queue elements are added at the end and removed from the front, so you can only access an element at the front or the back, like we were doing the same thing in list and in stack as well. So to use a queue we need to include queue header file, like we were using in all the previous things as well, in vector, in list, and in stack. Like we need to use them by including their header file, and in queue as well we need to use the same thing. We need to include queue header file to use it. And to create a queue you need to use queue keyword and then specify the type of values in it. It should be stored in within angle brackets, and then we need to write the name of the queue, like queue type, queue name. So first of all you need to write the keyword of queue, and after that you need to write the type, like what type of queue you are creating. You are creating a string queue, you are creating a variable queue, you are creating an integer queue. You need to write the type here, like I'm creating a string queue, so that's why I'm writing the type as a string, and after that I'm writing my queue name, which is as cars, like we were doing in the stack thing as well. Like we were writing the name of our queue or of our stack as cars. So here in queue as well we will be writing the same name of our queue as cars. And after that, if I move down and if we see how we have created the queue, so first of all we have added the queue value, which is called as queue keyword, and then I've created the type of queue, which is as a string, and after that I've written my queue name, which is cars, and in that value I have written all these cars name here as Volvo, BMW, Ford, Mazda. You can give any of the car names. If you want to add fruits name, if you want to add vegetables name, you can just change the name of your queues and you can write here fruits, vegetables, or anything you want to create the string of. So if I move down and if you want to understand how you can create or how you can add elements in your queue, so to add elements to the queue you have to use same function of dot push. After declaring the queue, the dot push function adds an element at the end of the queue. So what it will be doing is, now this dot push function will be adding the elements at the end of the queue. Like we were using this dot push function in stack as well to add the elements at the start of the stack, but in queue when you're using this dot put function it will be adding the elements normally we were doing in the previous things as well. But now the difference will be that this element which you will be adding will be coming at the end of the queue, and that's the difference between stack and queue, that the element in stack will be coming after using dot push will be at the first, and then when you're using dot push in the queue, so the elements you will be adding will be coming at the end of the queue, and that's the difference. If we move down and if we understand how we can access the queue element, so you cannot access queue elements by referring to the index number, and like you would with arrays and vectors. In a queue you can only access the element at the front or the back using dot front and dot back respectively. Like normally we were doing same thing in list as well, like we cannot access any element by referring the index number, we can only do that in vectors, and we can do it with arrays as well, but in queue you can only access the element at front or back. But in stack we were doing different thing, like in a stack you can only access the front element, but when you are talking about queue, so in queue you can access the element at front and at the back using dot front and dot back this functions respectively. And this is the example that how you can access the front element which is the first and oldest, and how you can access the back element which is last and newest. So to change the front and back elements you can also use dot front and dot back to change the values of the front and back elements. Like in front if I have written the value as Volvo, and in last if I have written value as Mazda, and if I want to change these two values, the front values and the back values, so for that I will be using also the same function of dot front and dot back like I were using in the previous thing, which was to access the queue elements. I was using front and back function. So here as well, to change the front and back elements I will be using same dot front and dot back, so that I can change the values of front back elements which I am adding here. So to remove the elements we have to use dot pop function like we were using in a stack as well. This is the same thing, like you can just say this is the similar thing in both in stack and queue, that you have to use dot pop function in both to remove elements from the last and from the first. If we move down and if we want to understand that how you can get the size of a queue, so for find out that how many elements are there in a queue, for that you need to use dot size function, so that you can get the size of a queue, like how many elements you have added in your queue or how many string value you have added in your queue. For that you can use this dot size function here. And if you want to check the queue is empty or not, so for that you can use dot empty function to find out if the queue is empty or not. That dot empty function returns the value as 1, and it will be also empty and 0 will be false, otherwise you will be getting the value printed at this. The 1 will be as true, and if the value is coming true, so it means that you have just keep your queue empty, so that's why you are getting the value true. But if you have written anything in your queue, so you will be getting the value as 0 false, because you have written anything in queue and then you are not getting the queue empty. That's why the value will be printed as false. And if you understand about the example, so this is the example that how you can use queue with the string values and all that thing, so you can get the output printed. So if I move down, and if you want to understand more about stack and queue, so we'll be learning more about it in the next video, in which I will be telling you in more detail that how you can use them. But now we have understand totally that how we are using queue, where the multiple elements of queue are being stored, and what is the example of queue that we can understand about, like I've told you in the start. Now we will be doing it practically, that if we are using queue, so what things we should be having in the output. So what I'm going to do is, now I will be first of all moving into my IDE which is called Replit. In the previous video I was just talking about stacks here. So now in this video we'll be learning about queue. So I'll be writing queue here, and then I'll be just pressing enter so that we can just save this file. So in this video we'll be learning about queues in C++. So I'll be writing here, and then I'll be changing here to S so that we can get the value. We have to press cancel. Alright, so what I'm going to do is, now I'll be pressing enter here, and you can just see we have changed the REPL name to queues, and I will be removing all these things which we were written in a stack. Then I will be writing here include IOStream like this, and here I will be writing include, and now the value which I will be writing will be as a string, and the third value which we will be printing will be as not vector, it will be as queues. So I will be writing the value as queue, or you can write queues as well, and then after that I will be writing using namespace std. Now we have to check that we have written the values right or wrong. So I'll be writing init main as well, so that we can write all the things in this init main class and we can get the output here. So if I move at the first, you can just see we are using the queue library, or you can just say queue header file here, and it is perfectly fine. What I'm going to do is I'll be copying this thing from here and I'll be pasting it. So now the first thing which we have printed here is queue, which is the keyword of queue, and then after that we have written the type of queue, which is a string, and then we have written the cars here. So now we have to write like this, the car push value which we have written as Volvo. Then what I'm going to do is now I will be creating a string here. So the string which we will be creating like this, and in a string value I will be writing some string values here like Volvo, BMW, Ford, Mazda. So these are the values which we have written here now. So what I'm going to do is simply I will be now running it here. After running, you can just see we are getting an error, and the error is saying me that you are writing this equal to print this thing. So I will be just copying this here now, and then I will be just moving here, and then if I write like this, and then if you print the output here like this, so now you can just see we are getting an error, and the error is saying me that you cannot print the cars like this if you're doing it, so you will be getting an error. But if you run it again like this, so you will be again getting the error in queue, because you have printed the queue but you have not printed the value as vector. So now we will be doing one thing, I will be including the value as a stack, then I will be also including other value which will be as vector. Now if I just run it here like this, so now again we are getting the same thing printed, which is the error here, which is the queue error which we are getting here now. So what I'm going to do is I'll be moving on to my file, and it is saying me that you have to create the queue, then we have to write the type of the values which we have to store in an angle bracket, which will be as a string, then we have to write the name of the queue like queue name. So queue name can be cars like this, and then we have to write the type of the queue in our example, which cannot be changed after it's been declared, like we were doing same thing in stack as well. And you cannot add any elements to the queue at the time of declaration like you can do with vectors. So this is the difference between vectors and queues, that in vectors you can add elements at the time of declaration, but in queue you cannot add elements at the time of declaration, and that's the difference between vector and queue. But we are talking about queue here, so we will be understanding that how you can add the things in queue. So first, the front function you will be printing will be as Volvo, and then the back, which will be the last element which you will be getting in your queue, will be Mazda, because first we have written Volvo, and the second thing which we have printed in the output which is as Mazda, and like that we will be getting all the things printed. So I hope you understand how we are using, and to access the queue elements we will be using dot front and dot back respectively here. So I'll be copying this so that we can use this thing. So after doing it, I will be moving down and I will be pasting it here so that we can get car.front as well, and we can get these all things printed as well. So I will be removing it and I will be running it here. So after running, you can just see we are getting this cars like this. I will be just closing it like this here now, and you can just see we are getting nothing because we have not printed anything in our output. That's why we are getting. So if I write the value as Volvo here, and then here if I write the value as BMW, Ford, Mazda like this, and then if I just remove these all things from here, and if I just write like this, and if I run it here like again, so you can just see we are again getting the same thing, or you can just say same error here, which is saying me these all things printed. So I will be removing this and I will be running it here. So now the error will be gone, and you can just see we are getting the output empty, because now these all values are running and we are getting the output. So first of all, the thing is that you need to print these all things, which is include IOStream, include string, include queue, and then include stack, which is really important to do, so that you can use these all things and you can work with queues here in C++. So I hope you understand how we are working with queues, how we are including the header file of queue, and how we are just adding the value of queues so that we can work with it. So I hope you understand this video in which we have learned about queues from start, that how you can access the queue element, how you can change its front and back element which you are adding, and how you can get the output of it. So if you have enjoyed this video and if you understand everything about queues in this video, so remember to hit a like to this video, and if you're new on this channel, want to see more videos like that, so remember to subscribe, and after subscribing, hit notification bell as well, so you can get the notifications of all my coming up videos which I'll be uploading in future. So now I'll be meeting you in next project or in next tutorial of C++ from start. So for today, goodbye.